Hey, what's up guys? JB back again with another edition of my Future Look series. And this week we're looking into the future of the Ice Element, the latest 90 cost unit from the Japanese side, and that's Eliza here. And she'll be coming into the permanent summoning pool in about 4 months, and I'm kind of excited about this one. You know, she is an Ice unit, and Ice has always been a personal favorite of mine. The second is, I love the Ice Selection Quest unit, Rafal. And thematically, Eliza here is her partner in crime, so I'm kind of looking forward to, pairing those two together. Now, I've gone through her kit, so let's take a look at some highlights I've put together here, and we'll see what we can look forward to. And as we always do, let's start with her TMR. Now, this one I actually kind of like. It provides 3 turns of a restore 20 AP on crit. Now, I know there are some folks out there that don't really appreciate crit in the game, and, I get it. But on units that it's applicable to, units who have a lot of base dexterity and high base crit, it can actually be pretty powerful, especially when you can stack a guaranteed effect like this one on top of it. Now, Eliza here fits both of those categories. She has the second highest starting dex in the game, just a couple behind Frederica, and actually matches Fred in her base value. So this TMR can actually give her a pretty reliable way of accruing up to 60 AP over the course of 3 turns. So definitely not a bad TMR by any means, but I think when you set it beside other AP accrual TMRs like Ziza's Bells or Lucio's TMR, I don't think it quite stacks up quite as nicely. All right, so moving into Eliza's stats here, and right off the bat, she has 67 base agility. She also has some pretty nice damage resistances here. Notably, she has 10% to slash and 15% to missile. I think though with Eliza's lower end HP total that we see here, if the enemy is able to break her range advantage and get in and attack her, she's definitely going to be susceptible to being 1 or 2 shot, especially if you break her defense or spirit, because she has 0 for those innately. Eliza's definitely going to be concerned when it comes to magic and pierce damage as well, and notably she's got -10 here to magic. In terms of her ailment resistances, I like that she has stop resistance here. In terms of class match play, Katone is still heavily picked to this day for her very strong limit break that has that stop effect on it. So definitely a nice one to have, so you don't really need to even worry too much about that factor. Eliza's attack value here is definitely nothing to write home about at only 448 innately, but it is kind of in line with other similar long range units. I think it's kind of an exception when you see high attack on a range unit. They don't often exceed 500 attack. I think of Frederica, for example, she only has 412 innate attack. Now, in terms of Eliza's innate accuracy, I have her at 170% or 195% if you're able to find a way to work in her Ranger lore passive, which we'll talk a little bit about in the next section. So she's definitely above average in this category, but if you're not able to work in that Ranger lore passive, you will want to look at gearing or espers or active buffs if you're going up against any sort of evade teams. So overall here, a pretty nice stat line for a range unit, though I do wish that attack were just a bit higher. Alright, so moving into Eliza's passive abilities and potential build choices, and I think there's a few ways that we can take her. One would be sort of an all-purpose build, and for that I would take her range 2 passive along with the Trick Lancer passive that gives her that 40 defense penetration and crit rate. A second option might be for an all-out Javelin build, and for that one I would use both Trick Lancer passives, with the main one being that Unwavering Javeliner passive, which does upgrade her Binding Javelin skill, getting it up to that nice 6 range. The third potential one I'm seeing would be sort of a max range archer build. Now, unfortunately, you would need to give up her defense penetration passive in order to use this, but in return, you do get that 25 accuracy we were talking about and the 1 additional range from Ranger lore. And I can see potential use for this, especially in manual PvP where super high defense stacking isn't really all that common, and definitely is an option I think to at least look at. Between a platinum bow and a trust stone attack set bonus, you could have 30 defense pen there to potentially offset some of that loss. Now, in terms of Eliza's counters here, like many range units nowadays, she does have reflex, and I think that's going to be the choice, in most cases. However, I do want to note this first one that I have highlighted, which is a new one for her unique job, and it has that increased chance of going off at 30%, but the effect here is really nice. No damage is coming in on this one, but it does imperil the target for 25% in both missile and ice resistance. Really interesting counter, I think. In most instances, you don't really want your ranged archer unit getting hit, but I think this one could potentially see some use in certain content if you really are wanting to debuff the enemy for these types of resistances. Alright, so jumping into Eliza's kit here, and let's start with her buffing capability. And within her main kit, she actually only has one buff. And thankfully, it's a great one. You know, it offers 3 turns of 25% agility and 40% attack. Now, I do believe this actually matches the best agility buff in the game that I'm aware of, which is Speed Force from Phoebe at 25%. So really nice buff here. You know, this even edges out Jaden's March of the Stag, which is only 20%. Another kind of cool flavor note here with this skill is I do believe this actually is a callback to Rafal here. You know, Rafal's TMR actually has a very similar effect. It's just that it's self-only. So I really love this little nod that they have to each other in their kits that the developers put in. Alright, her second buff here is only available when using her main job sub, but a very strong skill that I wanted to highlight here, in that it gives a large 60% accuracy buff for 3 turns, along with +1 range. And when she pops this, you know, assuming you've built up some other accuracy elsewhere, she's going to have no issues whatsoever hitting high evade units. A very nice skill here. Also an important one to highlight, you know, as this is actually the only active-based range up skill that she has available to her in her kit. Okay, so moving into her main attacks, and the first one I have here, it's pretty nice. It's a 3x3 square area of effect. We've got a medium 165 damage mod on this one. And I really like this one, especially on a range unit. You know, if the enemy is advancing into your threat zone, the range unit has the advantage of potentially being able to sit in place when they attack. So if you count that 20 CT you'd get by not moving, you could be looking at a potential 35 CT swing in your favor, giving you a very nice potential to double turn in that scenario. Alright, next one here. And all of these skills in her main job are actually 165 medium damage mods, so I'll just sort of leave it at that. But this one is interesting in that, first of all, it's a 3-hit attack, so my ears are already sort of perking up already. But if you're critting, you're also decreasing the target's AP by 20, so definitely some nice use cases here in both PvE and PvP. And you know, this is giving Ice yet another 3-hit chainer, so great for future guild raids there as well. Her third attack here applies a 25 defense break before the damage comes in. And here's a skill I think that potentially enables you to drop that defense penetration. Again, maybe more so from a manual perspective, but even so, always nice to have a defense break on hand, and definitely helps amp up the team's physical damage. Her fourth attack skill here is a cross AoE, and before the damage comes in, it's dispelling both protect and shell status from the target. So this is definitely shaping her up to be a very nice anti-Joom unit. That protect shell, you know, has gone a long way in helping Joom sort of stand up pretty well against the ice element, all things considered. So having an option in the ice roster to dispel that status will be very nice, you know, for the element overall. And lastly, we have her limit break here, and you can see the range on this is an impressive base 6 range. And before the damage comes in, this is actually knocking down the enemy ice resistance by 38%. We then get that standard 200% damage mod, making this easily her hardest hitting attack. And after the damage lands, she's also decreasing the enemy's movement by 1 as well. So hugely powerful debuff there, you know, particularly for manual control. It can definitely be useful in auto content as well, but unfortunately the AI won't sort of pick the optimal target to put this on, and we'll just throw it on the target that has the most hate. Great limit break here though, you know, and perils are always useful in any mode of play, so I like this one quite a bit. Now, not listed here is her sort of low damage, low AP spam type ability, and that one actually does give her a 25% chance to berserk the target, so definitely another notable skill that she has, though really not all that reliable of a chance, especially now in the Trust Stone era, so I don't really consider that one hugely powerful. Now, one thing you may have noticed on these various attacks here is that outside of her limit break, the range on her abilities is limited to a base range of 4, and then that area of effect on a couple of them here will bring it up to a potential base range of 5. Now, that sort of everyday build option that we were discussing in the previous section only gives her another 2 range on top of that, so that's going to put her at 7 range. And as we discussed, she has no active range up ability unless you take her main job sub for that +1 range and 60 accuracy that we talked about. Now, you could opt to forego that main job sub and maybe run her with another unit that could give her something like aimed fire, maybe a unit like Barrett, for example, and that would get her up to 8 range in that build, which is pretty nice. But I think if you were really looking to compete with those top-end range damage dealers like Fred or Corwell or Jaden, I think that's where that maximum range build that I talked a little bit about earlier could be an attractive option. And in that case, we'd be looking at up to 9 range here on her area skills and up to 10 range on her limit break, which is very, very strong. Alright, so let's move into Eliza's sub-jobs. And notably here, she does get Ranger as a sub-job, and Ranger skills do have a base range of 5. So definitely another way to sort of amp up her range a little bit. It also gives her access to Sharpshoot for a guaranteed hit, as well as Supercharge and Mega Charge. I'm not a huge fan of these last two skills, with the cast times on them. So I think personally I would probably opt for her main job sub if I'm going for a range build. I think both of the skills that she gets there are pretty impactful, especially that 60 accuracy range buff that we were discussing. That main job sub also gives her a pretty interesting attack. It's a nice 185 mod, but on top of that it does grant a pretty powerful 50 missile res penetration and 50 defense penetration on the attack. So essentially it's a way to almost completely ignore those bits of mitigation. Definitely a strong option against highly resistant targets. My only issue with this skill is that super long 320 cast time that it brings, which definitely could present some problems if it's not used and lined up properly. In terms of Eliza's Trick Lancer sub, I do actually love this job quite a bit on Winter Luartha. Binding Javelin is an amazing skill with that high chance to immobilize that it has. This sub job would also give her access to a 20% agility break as well. I'm a little hesitant about using this here on Eliza though. As we talked about, she's a very squishy unit, so especially when we're considering auto PvP, these pierce skills could in many situations be her most damaging options, and that's going to draw her forward even more and potentially put her into the enemy's threat range. I do like Trick Lancer quite a bit more for manual play when you can sort of pick and choose when you want to use those skills. Even still though, I think for my own personal preference, I would prefer to use her in that ranged style build. Alright, so next section here, and what are going to be the future considerations for Eliza? Well, the week following her release in JP, they just got this Black Rose card. Amazing art here as always, kind of just showing a lighter moment here for this trio. Pretty powerful card though for the ice element, finally giving them their own missile attack up buff. You can envision using this in a party, maybe with Rafal and Rosa, maybe in an ice missile party, and then use cards like Dark Odin and Freezus, and the damage potential there is going to be quite substantial. Nice that it's also giving that party crit rate here and that flat 52 dex on the card, so definitely leaning into what Eliza wants. Defensively, it's also bringing that nice 20% slash resist too, so that would give Eliza 30% before anything else is considered. So nice footnote there, and that would definitely help keep her out of that one-shot range, specifically for that slash damage. I do like the bestowed effect here too for that 30% acquired AP. If you were able to stack this with Laswell's vision card, maybe even the astrologer vision card as well as a sub VC, maybe even throw the diamond coat there on top, I think that's going to go a long way to potentially allowing her to run without Ziza's bells. Her skills are actually quite expensive AP wise, so I definitely think that's something to consider. Overall though, nice vision card addition for ice, and if you're going all in for Eliza and specifically for an ice missile party, I think you definitely grab this one when it comes out. Alright, so what's the verdict on this preview of Eliza? 1, this is definitely a unit that can pop off and be very reliable when it comes to critting. And that can represent a good source of additional damage, especially if you stack up the crit damage with something like a Shinra Bangle or Titus Necklace. 2, as we saw with that skill in her main sub job, she has the potential to really ratchet up and get very high defense and missile res penetration. 3, she's one of the rare few in the game who are able to dispel the status of Protect and Shell. And 4, I think she's a very solid unit, especially when we're talking about manual play. She can break defense, she can imperil, she has that move down on her limit break as well. Great accuracy potential with that 60 accuracy buff that we talked about. Oh, and on top of that, she has that 3-hit chain attack as well. So definitely one of the stronger guild grade units that I've seen come along in a while on top of it. On the other hand though, the drawbacks I'm seeing right now is definitely the squish factor. If the enemy attackers are able to pounce in on her quickly, I think you're going to be praying for a reflex or you're going to be in trouble. The next one would be that sacrifice that you need to make in order to really ramp up her range to compete with some of the better missile units out there. And that would be sacrificing access to a different sub job and that 40 defense pen passive that we talked about. Lastly, she's also quite AP hungry with several very expensive skills, which may force you to use bells in some scenarios. Definitely all things to think about and consider. At the end of the day though, I think she's a nice addition to the ice roster. She has some nice range debuffing capabilities that she brings, but I definitely don't see her as making a huge splash or really shaking up the meta all that much. So that's Eliza, and I think that she'll fit very well into an ice missile team. But we have quite a few options there already. We have Rosa, we have Barrett, we have Curry and Rafal. But 2 of those are actually limited units that you may not have access to, so in that case Eliza may be more attractive to you. I do also love this pairing here though with both Eliza and Rafal, and I think they could form a pretty decent team together too. I'll have to sort of see where my Visior is sitting 4 months from now, but my interest is definitely piqued by this unit. By that point though, we're going to know what the next big collab is, so it might end up being a hard sell. But what about you? Are you a diehard ice player? After hearing about Eliza's kit here today, Are you going to set aside some Visior to pull her? Or are you holding out for the next big thing? Definitely let me know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, help us grow and be notified of my future videos. And that's really all I have to say for today. So as always, stay safe out there, and I'll see you guys in the next one.